So for this homework assignment, you are asked to do exercises 6.1a on page 148, problems 2, 3, 5, 6, 8, 9, 11, 12, 14, and 15, as well as exercises 6.1b on page 151, 2, 3, 5, 6, 9, 11, 12, 14, 15, and 17. Beginning on problem number 2 on page 148, actually I should have said 147, but that's okay. For each of the following propositions, you are asked to identify the subject and predicate terms, the quality and quantity, and then name the form. So, sentence number 1, some movie stars are not good actors. And for this, the subject is movie stars, the predicate is good actors. You don't include the word not as part of the predicate. Are not is actually the copula, because remember the copula joins the predicate with the subject. The quality is negative. And notice the word not appears in the copula here. That tells us that this categorical proposition is negative. The quantity is particular, which we learned from the word some. And then finally, the form is O. And you recall, hopefully from the last lecture, we had 4 forms, A, E, I, and O. And this one is O. Some baseball players, number 3, some baseball players are not golfers. Subject is baseball players. Predicate, golfers. The quality is negative. The quantity is particular. And just like the last one, the form is O. Number 5. All phones are communication devices. The subject is phones. The predicate, communication devices. The quality is affirmative. The quantity is universal. And finally, the form is A. Number 6, some phones are cordless devices. In this one, the subject is phones. The predicate is cordless devices. The quality is affirmative. The quantity is particular. And then the form is I. This is quite repetitive, I know. Number 8, some people who have PhDs are airheads. Having known a lot of people with PhDs, I can attest that this is true. Subject, people who have PhDs. So the subject here is a little bit longer than some of the subjects we've seen. Predicate, airheads. Pretty good movie. The quality is affirmative. The quantity is particular. And then the form is I. Number 9. No self-respecting person is a liar. And this one, the subject is a self-respecting or not, I shouldn't say but just self-respecting person. The predicate, liar. The quality is negative, and the quantity is universal. Then finally, the form is E. Number 11, all discoveries are addition to the stock of human knowledge. And this one, the subject is discoveries. And the predicate is additions to the stock of human knowledge. The quality is affirmative. The quantity is universal. And the form is A. Number 12. No person over the age of 60 is an Olympic marathon champion. And in this one, the subject is person over the age of 60. The predicate is an Olympic marathon champion. The quality is negative. The quantity is universal. And the form is E. All paintings are works of art. In this one, the subject is paintings. The predicate, works of art. The quality is affirmative. The quantity, universal. And the form is A. Number 15. Some works of art are not beautiful things. The subject is works of art. The predicate, beautiful things. The quality is negative. Notice the word not right here. That tells us it's negative. The quantity is particular. Get that from the word some. And the form is O. So those were pretty straightforward. I don't know if those were too terribly difficult. I know it was a little monotonous and repetitive. You probably wanted to, I don't know, shove a knife in your ear hearing me, say quantity is this, quality is that. But it's important to just repeat the process and do a lot of them so you get practice, because it's going to be very confusing for you if later on I'm saying, oh, the quality of this or the quantity of that, and you don't know what I'm saying. So Practice makes perfect. I know it's redundant and repetitive, but it's the only way really to learn. So you are also asked to do exercises 6.1b on page 151, and here all I wanted you to do was to put the following standard English sentences, or put the following English sentences into standard form. There were other instructions, but I didn't ask you to follow those. Just put these sentences into standard form. So here's the first sentence. No mushrooms that grow in this forest are edible. And to put this into standard form, you should say something like the following. No mushrooms that grow in this forest are edible things. Now, I want to pause here for a second. It's not critical that you use the word things. You could have said edible foods, edible objects, edible mushrooms. The key thing here is what I have in red is you have to name a class. Are edible, or the word edible is, again, an adjective, and you need a noun that names a class of things. Edible nouns does name a class of, edible things does name a class, but just edible by itself doesn't. So you have to add a word here, because remember, your subject, which is mushrooms that grow in this forest, that is a class of things, and your predicate also has to name a class of things. So again, you didn't have to necessarily use the word things. You could have said foods, objects, mushrooms would have worked. It would have sounded kind of like I guess you said no mushrooms that grow in this forest are edible mushrooms. Yeah, that would work. The only things that you couldn't say would be a nonsensical words that you could put in there. Like if you said no mushrooms that grow in this forest are edible fish, that's just dumb. Or no mushrooms that grow in this forest are edible chairs. While both of those are true statements, they really just are kind of nonsensical things to say. They're silly things. But here, as long as the noun you insert it here, it makes sense with the sentence, you're fine. So on a couple of other examples, I'll give you multiple options. But all right, moving along. Number 3, some men are born great. And the problem with this sentence is our predicate doesn't name a class. Our predicate only says born great, but it has to be a class of things. So to rewrite this sentence and to put it in a standard form, remember standard form, both the subject and predicate have to name classes. So we'd say something like some men are born great men or born great people. You could say are born great individuals or born great leaders. You could put a lot of different things, what I have in red right here. But the key idea is that you have to name a class of things in both the subject and the predicate. Some men have greatness thrust upon them. This one was a little more difficult, but again, it's the same problem we've seen in the last two, which is that the predicate doesn't name a class. So we have to say something like the following. Some men are men or people who have greatness thrust upon them. Or you could say, like I said, you could say leaders, individuals. You can say a lot of different things here, but notice here, our subject is men, that names a class, and then this right here also is a class of individuals. We could say men who have greatness thrust upon them. Well, that is a class. It is different from, men who don't have greatness thrust upon them. But simply saying have greatness thrust upon them, that doesn't name a class of things. Number 6, none of the students in my 4th hour class failed the exam. Now, this one is also not in standard form for a couple of reasons. Notice one thing here is that, first of all, we're not using one of the standard quantifiers. Remember, we have 4 standard quantifiers, all, no, some not. That is, or actually that's the 4 that we're going to use. And this is using the word none. So we're going to have to fix that. We're going to have to use none. The second one is we're going to have to insert a few words to ensure that both our subject and predicate name classes of things. So this is how we would rewrite this into standard form. No student in my 4th hour class is you could say student or person, individual, but no student in my 4th hour class is a student who failed the exam. So I've changed this, so none is actually a quantifier, but it's not one of the 4 standards we're going to use. We have to use the word no, because again, I know it's a little annoying, but this is just convention that we adopt so that we can all be on the same page when we're doing categorical logic. But no student in my 4th hour class, and now student in my 4th hour class is the subject, and it does name a class. And as well as once we insert this part right here, student, a student slash person, you could say a student, or you could, I'm putting the slash here to indicate that there are multiple things you could have said. You don't write student slash person. That would not be the correct answer, but you could pick student, you could pick person, you could pick something else. But now I also have named a class in my predicate. So subject has to name a class, predicate has to name a class, and we have to use the standard quantifiers. Number 9, the political party that wins a presidential election can expect to lose congressional seats 2 years later. Now notice in this one, we're not given a quantifier. In the last problem, we were given a non-standard quantifier, but in this one, we're not given one at all. And we're going to have to insert a quantifier here using one of the 4 standard ones, and we're also going to have to, as well as that, make sure that our subject and predicates do name classes of things. So here's the way that you could put this into standard form. No political party that wins a presidential election is a party, thing, organization. You could pick anything like that that can expect to lose congressional seats 2 years later. Notice that I had to add the quantifier at the beginning. My subject does name a class, political party that wins a presidential election. Then my predicate now also names a class, a party that can expect to lose congressional seats 2 years later. So again, sometimes you're not given quantifiers and you have to add them in order to put the proposition into standard form. Number 11, some skiers are out of control. And this one's not too terribly difficult, but some skiers are skiers, people, individual. You could even put things, whatever. It doesn't matter as long as it names a class and that class makes sense within the context of the sentence. Some skiers are skiers who are out of control. Blessed are the meek. This one was kind of tricky. And this one, again, you are not given a quantifier, and you're also going to have to add words in order to make sure that the sentence is in standard form. You're gonna have to make sure that the subject and predicate name classes. And the correct way to do this is as follows. All meek people are blessed people. It's not saying all blessed people are meek, but rather the opposite. It's saying basically, blessed are the meek. If you're meek, then you'll be blessed. And the way that we write this is as follows. We have to add our quantifier. We also have to make sure that we name classes. Meek people, blessed people, those are classes. So in this one we had to modify both the subject and predicate to ensure that they name classes. Number 14, nobody's perfect. Now this is another tricky one because we have a non-standard quantifier and we have to add words in order to ensure that our subject and predicates name classes, and this is how we would do it. No person is a perfect person. The only word we could really use from the initial sentence was the word perfect. But here again, we have to use the standard quantifiers, and we have to make sure that our subject and predicate do name classes. Number 15, every rise in the stock market is followed by a fall. This one was a little tricky, I thought. First of all, we have a non-standard quantifier, every, and we have to change that to all. And then we have to also make sure that our subject and predicates name classes. Rise in the stock market is followed by a fall. Notice followed by a fall doesn't name a class, so we're going to have to add a word, and it might not be obvious what that is, but this is the way we'd write it in standard form. All rises in the stock market are things, events, occasions. You could use a lot of different words here that are followed by a fall, and then you might, if you want to round it out, put in the stock market. Events that are followed by a fall in the stock market, but things that are followed, occasions. Any of these terms would work. This one was a little tricky because I remember working through it and I was like, what could I add here to make the predicate into a class? But something like this. And finally, number 17, not a single doctor can figure out what is wrong with my son. Notice here we're using a non-standard quantifier. It has to be one of the standard ones, which is going to be no. You can't say all and then not or something like that. It has to be no. And you're going to have to also make sure that your predicate names a class. So to put this in standard form, it would be something like this. No doctor is a doctor, person, individual, professional, medical professional. Anything like that would work. But basically, you have to name a class here. So no doctor is, we're just going to say a doctor who can figure out what is wrong with my son. Again, notice that the subject names a class, and now the predicate names a class of things. So I know some of this is a little obnoxious to do, but it's going to be really important for when we start doing categorical syllogisms, because there are going to be certain rules we have to apply. And if we don't have a clear subject and a clear, we don't have a clear class in the subject and a clear class in the predicate, our rules are going to be messed up. Not only that, if we don't have the quantifier coming first, our rules are going to be messed up. So I know this is a little tedious and obnoxious, but it's really important for building for the future that we have together. No, building towards learning how to conduct or determine validity for categorical syllogisms.